Has anybody seen me speak before? A few people. Anybody wondering why there's that little logo in the bottom after having seen me speak before? I've changed roles. After 18 years, more or less, of working in the IT industry on the IT department side, in March I went to the dark side and I joined Microsoft. Dark side is just the other side of the IT industry, generally, not just us. My new role is heading up a team of technology evangelists in a group which is called Developer and Platform Evangelism. We are tasked with helping people in the IT industry to understand and embrace, hopefully, the technologies that Microsoft have today and going forward. How that translates is me and my colleagues and my peers appearing at events like this. We also have a number of channels to market. I'm learning marketing speak as we go here as well. So MSDN and TechNet, which are the sort of more traditional ones. Ubelly, which is I can't remember what they call it, but basically they tried to make it not feel like Microsoft so that people who generally don't develop using Microsoft technologies can relate to it. And then also we've got some really interesting stuff like Microsoft BizSpark, which is run out of the DPE team, and that's about helping startups and providing technology for startups and support for startups. And there's like 2,000 companies or something who've gone through that program. What I'm going to talk about after Dave has spoken for a while is some research that DPE organised in the first quarter of this year, and that was looking at, I guess, feelings, attitudes and so on amongst the IT community, not at the CIO level, but the kind of everybody else level. So following on from Thomas's information from the research, it's interesting to see where the kind of rank and file in IT's minds are at with this stuff, and we'll cover that in a bit. Just to set the scene a bit for this, though, I was in discussion a few weeks ago with Charlene, who is running the UK Cloud Power marketing campaign, which you may have seen some posters around for. I know Waterloo Station for about a month was covered with the things. And I was chatting to her about what we should talk about within this presentation. And Charlene's probably, I don't know, 10 years younger than me. She's younger than me. And I was chatting to her about when I first started working, and I started working at KPMG back in 1993, and I was given an email account, but my email account was something on CC Mail which enabled me to communicate with people within KPMG, within the UK business and further afield. Only very special people were allowed internet email. And I think most of it then was still done on X400 addresses, which is something I've never understood. And Charlene looked at me at this, and there was this kind of, in her face. She couldn't understand how everybody in an organisation would be given email addresses, but they wouldn't be able to access outside of the organisation. But back in 1993, this made perfect sense from an IT management perspective, because you don't want to have, stuff going between companies. There's a terrible security risk, and all sorts of things could come from it. And of course, they were kind of right. But that divide of organisations, which only 18 years ago, 18 years I've been working, it seems a bit odd now, doesn't it? That's how stuff changes. If we look back, actually, we've been through lots of changes already. Introduce Dave. He's just going to talk a bit then about some of the things that he's seeing today, I guess.
Today, tomorrow, yesterday, doesn't matter. I'll make it all up. Thanks, Matt. So, I'm Dave. I'm the token long-haired, bearded, not sandal-wearing today, hippie, to talk to you about the consumer side of technology. Why the hell am I talking about consumer side of technology? Because I believe so much that consumers are going to drive our enterprise IT business, that after 20 years of enterprise IT in my career, I actually joined the consumer side of Microsoft to see what it was really like and to see if all of the sunshine I'd been talking about was actually going to come true. So here's what I found out. So first of all, this is yet another cloud conference. How many of you have been to a cloud conference or cloud discussion before? Hands in the air. Excellent. So, like all good cloud conferences, I'm going to guess that you're going to see lots of slides with lots of fluffy white clouds talking about the future and how it's all going to change. The problem for me with all of these conversations is that we tend to start with cloud. And starting a conversation with cloud is a bit like standing up at the beginning of the movie and saying, Bruce Willis is a ghost. You know, ultimately, that's the point, that's the destination that we're going to reach. But without all of the context, without all of the color around the story, you lose all of the value, you lose all of the understanding of why that might be important. So my job here today is actually to give you some of that color, to give you some of the context about why cloud is really important, and not just from a return on investment financial perspective, but why it's important to the people that work with you, the people, whether it's your customers, your employees, and the things that you do every day. Last year, we launched a survey, a study called the Hybrid Organization, and unlike most technology company case studies and surveys, this was actually a proper one. We got real people, grown-ups in their industry, and rather than a survey that says, here's a big lofty business problem, and the solution is SharePoint, Google Docs, insert technology product name here, we actually wanted to think about it differently. So we got a leading sociologist in the UK, a guy called Professor Michael Hume from the University of Lancaster. We got a guy called Philip Ross, who, to call him an architect does him a disservice. He does a lot of work around how the built environment, how office space is changing in the future. And we got some very knowledgeable people from Microsoft and me to write a technology paper about how technology is changing. Now, the interesting thing is, in these 3 white papers, in each one, there was a really compelling story for change. But what happens when you superimpose the 3 together, you end up with this absolutely revelationary view of how the world is changing around us, and how we, in the IT industry, if we don't understand that, we're going to really struggle to be relevant with the people that we're here to provide service for. No conversation about cloud will be complete without talking about the economy. I'm not going to give you the usual spiel about the economy. Yeah, we all know we need to do more for less, blah, 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 blah. The important thing to understand is that the economy will give us the biggest driver to make the transformation we've been dreaming about in enterprise IT for years. Many of the customers that I talk to will say, you know what, it's a real pain in the backside that we've got to save a bunch of money and we're cutting service. But then the really switched on ones will have a little twinkle in their eye and they'll say, well, you know what, this is great, because finally I've got a chance to make some real substantive business change. I'm going to change the way that we do business rather than just tweaking around with the operational stuff. So think about the economy as a positive thing in your business. Help it drive forward the things that you know are right in your organization. So we're going to park the economy and we're going to look at some of the data points that this report, the hybrid organization, exposed. The first thing is, and you'll see throughout my presentation that it is basically an exercise in mass stereotyping and generalizations. So I love my job. This is a snapshot of the UK workforce, right? It's a couple of years old, but give or take, it's roughly right. There are 3 kinds of generation in the workforce today. Interesting, you say, but not quite as interesting as the fact that in the wings, there are 9 million millennials, people who've grown up with technology, not like most of us, where technology was something special that you only saw at work or in a place of study. These are people who think of technology as just a natural part of everyday life. And as they slowly join the workforce over the next 10 years, there is going to be a massive change. There's going to be a fundamental shift in how people think about technology. Not just in the younger generation, but that change drives change in the older generations. And I'll give you an example from a company that Matt referenced earlier and knows well. I used to work for KPMG, funnily enough, and I remember a senior partner who was your stereotypical senior partner. He used to come into the office in the morning. His admin team would print out all of his X.500 emails. He would then go into his office and he would manually annotate all of his replies. They would then go back to the admin people, who would then dutifully type them up and send them from his mailbox. Fantastic, excellent use of technology. Now, fair enough, this was 10 years ago. That same guy today is knocking on the CIO's door saying, how come I go home to better technology than you give me at work? How come I can IM my son who's at college on the other side of the country, and I can't even do that with the stuff that you give me? Now, his experience of technology has changed, not because his workforce, his workplace has changed that, but his personal experience has changed. Because he's got kids, it's changed. And so don't think about this stuff being about young people. All of our interactions with technology is changing every day as it becomes more and more pervasive in the things that we do. So moving forward to the built environment, one of the things that the report showed up is that on average, knowledge workers spend 45% of their time at their desk. 45%. So the astute financial experts amongst you will be saying, hang on a minute, that means that in theory, 55% of office space is wasted. Well, even if you don't go to that far of an extreme, what you realise is that people are spending less time at their desk and more time collaborating with other people. So there's a saving to be made there. You don't have to take the 55%, but you could take a bigger slice. Maybe you don't need all the office space that you need, that you have today. We did this with our Dutch office. We reduced the size of the office by 30%, which effectively pushed all of our people out into the big bad world. They couldn't stay in the safe cocoon of the Microsoft building with free coffee and lovely other fluffy seats and things like that. They had to go and do things like spend time with our customers, be with our partners, work with people in our industry. And guess what happened? Our sales went up 50%. Not specifically as a result of that, but because we were more engaged, because it changed the way that people worked. And so be thoughtful about your office space. We're looking, we used to talk, when it was all about unified comms, we used to talk about the death of the desk phone. Philip Ross talks about the death of the desk. Why is it that we go to a specific place at a specific time of day? I live in the Midlands, I commute to London, and I stand there sometimes in the morning at Euston about 9 o'clock. And I just look at this wave of people coming in to be in a specific place for a specific period of time. Really? How mad is that? Now, I'm not saying that some people don't have to be in a specific place, but many of our knowledge workers don't. So why is it we do that? Think about the environmental impact. Think about the financial impact. What happens if you change the way that people work? So what we're seeing is that work is ceasing to be a destination, but increasingly it's being an activity. So think about people. Microsoft provides using, whether it's a smartphone, a tablet device, even a laptop computer. How much do you actually care about the technology that makes that work? In the old days, we used to care a lot. These days, normal human beings really couldn't give a stuff. Trust me, I asked my wife, she couldn't give a stuff how it works. It's a bit like saying, when I get into the car, do I sit there putting the key in and thinking, at this moment, the precise amount of fuel is being injected into a certain area would be... No, you don't think about that. You get in your car, you turn the ignition, and off you go to wherever it is that you're going. Technology is no different. And the problem is, in the IT industry, is that we've spent a lot of time thinking about how important and special technology is. We still want to tell the world about that. But if we're spending time inside our organizations debating how email works or how the directory service works, we're actually not spending time thinking about how do we make our business the best in its industry? How do we transform the way that our business works? So it's about commoditization of technology as well. It's about pushing stuff below the waterline that is a commodity that we don't need to worry about. We also have a very different experience of technology at home. This might be a tough crowd to gauge this, but I'll ask anyway. How many of you, put your hands up, if you have a computer at home that is better than the one that you get at work? So more recent software, faster, right, okay. So about 90% of you. And what you think the people in your company are any different to that. So we as individuals are living this rich technical life. And yeah, it's a spectrum. Some people are at the far end and they're on Twitter and they're Facebooking their friends. But normal human beings are also shopping at Amazon, buying stuff from Tesco's, maybe looking at stuff on the BBC and doing stuff with Twitter in that sort of sense. So my point is we have this really rich, beautiful technical experience in our personal lives, and then we go into the office. And typically, this is what happens. Organizations still have this concept of the dumb user. You know, people are stupid, huh? Well, actually, you know what? They're not. You know, when was the last time someone from Amazon or Tesco came round your house and said, look, actually, I'm terribly sorry, we've had to change the interface, and before you use it, we thought you might like to go on this little training course. It doesn't happen. Now, I'm sure we might bitch and moan, and we've changed it, and it's moved from here to here. But as individuals, we suck it up and we get on with it. So why then, when we come into the office in the morning and we cross that threshold, does all of that change? Why does the organisation treat me like an idiot? And why do I think, as the IT guy, oh God, we're going to make a change to the finance system. Right, so we're going to need 3 weeks of training. We're going to have to do an internal marketing. You know, come on. We don't need to do that anymore to the same extent because people broadly are used to using technology in an innovative way in their personal lives. How many of your organisations block Facebook or Twitter at the firewall? A large proportion of you. That's really interesting to me because it's a bit to what Matt was talking about. Do you remember when the internet first arrived, or the web more particularly, and there was only one terminal in the office that had internet access? Oh, wow, can I have a go? You know, how would your businesses run today if that was the case? I'm probably guessing that they wouldn't run today. Social media is going to be the same. Social media, to me, represents as big a change to the internet as the web did. If you think about it, how many customers of yours exist on Facebook and Twitter? If you think that over half the people connected to the internet, some 500 million people, are on Facebook. And if your organization blocks that stuff at the firewall, you're saying a number of things. First thing you're saying, actually, there's this big proportion of our audience that, frankly, I just don't want to listen to. Secondly, why are you really doing that? Now, the IT guys amongst you will say, oh, it's security. Yeah, we don't like that stuff. Well, the reality is more about it's a management issue. Certainly, and I always feel like I used to do a lot of work with charity. I used to do a lot of work in the public sector. It's probably about the same thing these days. But, and it's a management issue for them because they don't trust people. If we allow Facebook and Twitter, you'll just waste your time. Well, if you take that view, you better frisk people for newspapers and Sudoku books when they come in the office. You know, ban the water cooler. What you're saying is that if I've employed you as a professional, I don't trust you to be professional in the way that you do your job. These tools are really important. They change collaboration, they change your relationship with the customer. And if as an organization you block that, you really are going to struggle to stay engaged both with your internal audience, but equally with your external audience. And on the internal audience point, the real issue there is if you've got somebody who's using that stuff and is good at it and really likes it, they're actually engaged with technology. Do you remember the challenge we used to have 10 years ago, or 5 years ago even? We just can't get people to engage with technology. They don't want to use it. We would have killed for something in people's personal lives that we could then use at work to get them engaged in technology and doing the stuff that we need. The world is changing. Technology is changing. In IT, we have to change as a result. The other thing, I've said it before, is if you want to sweep to the assumption that this is all about the kids, you're wrong. Absolutely, fundamentally wrong. Biggest growth in social networking in this country, and in fact globally, is in the older generations. It's not just about kids. If you don't believe me, watch Question Time tonight. Spark up Twitter, put in the Question Time hashtag and see what happens. What you see there is not a bunch of kids talking about, I've just had the world's best latte. We see people engaging with politics, using technology to turn what is a one-dimensional broadcast experience, or in my house, me shouting at the telly, to this two-dimensional, two-way dialogue between a whole bunch of people who care about a particular topic. So these things are starting to come into normal, everyday life for normal human beings like me and you. And so we cannot afford to make the assumption that this is just about young people. This is changing everything that we do. So a lot of what I've said, I think, judging by the reaction some of you get, some of you think, yeah, he's probably on another planet. Maybe you're right. Just to sort of drive home the point and to show that I've been around a while, I thought it might be useful to sack the juggler at the back, to just take a view about the journey that we've been on in IT. So if we think about back to the 50s and maybe early 60s, The guys in IT were the guys with a white suit, big thick glasses, twinkle in their eye, mainframe in the back room, and it was like they were the only people. This thing was really special. We move into the 70s, and now it's all about data processing, yeah? And you remember this sort of thing, running around with punch cards and all that stuff. And then we move to the 90s, and in the 90s, for people in IT, that was a heyday. That was the time when we were the only people on the planet that knew how technology worked, and more importantly, could translate that into how the business worked. Nobody could touch us, right? We were the people. You couldn't mess with us because we could do it, and nobody had that experience elsewhere because you didn't go home to better computing. You didn't have this experience outside of work. But the problem that we have today is that's no longer the case. How many of you have people coming to you or to your IT people saying, I've got an iPad, make it work at work, please, or an iPhone, or a Windows phone, or a consumer device? I bet a lot of you do. Now, you've got a challenge, you've got a choice about how you deal with that question. The first thing is you can say, well, sorry, mate, you're not going to use that. No, it's insecure. Or you can say, actually, you know what, I can see why you'd want to do that. You can't do it this way, but let me show you how you can. Because if you don't enable people to use that rich consumer experience that they have, two things are going to happen. First is they're going to go and bloody do it anyway, and they're going to do it without your blessing, and they're going to do it in an insecure way that's going to compromise your network and compromise your IT system. And secondly, you're just going to marginalize the role of IT in your organization. If all the thing that I worry about, I remember 10 years ago when my arch enemy was like the head of IT security at the organization I worked for. And you know what? The buggers made me share an office with him just for kicks. His definition of a good computer, there was one that was switched off, locked in a box with all the plugs cut off, right? And mine was like, hey, listen, every port should be open, man, because we should all be allowed to do what we want. Now, the point that I think IT guys run the risk of being that security guy. No, you can't do that. No, can't do that. No, still can't do that. And it's back to this computer says no stuff. We can't afford to do that because the stuff that we have to offer our business, whether it's through cloud or anything else like that, is really important. And we've got lots of experience. We can really change the way the business works and how successful the business is. But we have to be bold enough to make that leap. So a lot of this is about being confident in how we provide IT service. That's really hard to do because our first reaction is I want to control everything. I want to save you from the really complicated, hard stuff, right? You don't have to worry about it. I'll lock the desktop down so you can't change anything and then you can't get into trouble and it'll be all right. We can't do that anymore because people actually can change stuff. They do that at home and the world doesn't end. Yeah, okay, like anybody in the IT industry, I seem to be the personal support line for anybody in my family and their friends. But this stuff broadly works and it broadly happens, okay? But in IT, you have to take that step, and it's actually a step back. Now, that's not to say that all of this should be a free-for-all and everybody should have the capability to do whatever they want. You need to build a baseline. You need to build a safety net for people. It's a bit like what Microsoft do to Matt and I. Basically, we can have a corporate build if we want, or we can go and build our own machines, put what software we want. The only thing that happens is when I log into the network, we all get stuffed into quarantine until we get checked for the latest patches, latest AV. The other thing that's important, if I choose to do whatever I want on my laptop, is I can still phone the helpline. They won't turn me away. The service level's different, but I still get support. So I'm empowered as an individual to make a choice about how I use technology to do my job. That is a really big change. And I'm not telling you about Microsoft because we're this lovely, really advanced technology company. We've just got a different view on how you manage people and how you encourage them to be successful in what they do. And there are many other organizations doing that. Our challenge remains this really big paradox. If we're in IT, it's on one hand, we actually need to stop telling you how important technology is and how complicated it is. For me, the best technology is the technology that's invisible, the stuff that you don't think about. If you have to spend time thinking about the tool, you're not thinking about the task. But the flip side of that is if I don't tell you that it's important and that it's complicated, you'll cut my funding and you'll do a bunch of stupid things and then you'll have to call me in to clean up after you. So you've got to walk the line. Neither of those extremes is right. It's about striking that balance between commoditization, consumerization. They're the bits that make the difference. Because in summary, the thing that we need to do, if we think about where we are today, The majority of the CIO's time is spent thinking about, how do I keep the lights on, how do I do more for less, blah, blah, blah. And if they're lucky, if they're really, really lucky, they'll get a couple of minutes in the shower or when they're walking the dog or whenever it is, when they'll go, how could I change the world? That's just really wrong, and to me that's just phenomenally a wasted resource, even if it's not the CIO about the IT people. Because where we want to be is the operational stuff, that just happens, it's a commodity, I don't really sweat that. What I want to do is I want to get back to empowering the business. I want to change the way that the organization can be successful. Cloud represents the opportunity for us to do that, but it's going to cause us to face some really difficult decisions about how we provide IT to our organizations.
So, thank you, Dave. Where do we find ourselves today? So we did a survey, as I said, first quarter. It consisted of just under 2,000 IT professionals. There was a bit of a Microsoft bias in that they're people who subscribe to TechNet, but as much as anything, it was a fairly, and I've seen the list of job titles, and it went at all sorts of levels. About 300 of the 2,000 were in IT management roles, but it wasn't up to sort of CIO kind of level. Where is your organisation with regard to cloud computing? Mostly either no plans or at discussion. A few people using. And the barriers to adoption, this is almost what you just said, Dave. Data sovereignty and privacy, not to put that down, but as the things that people come about, is integration with existing systems, risk, our existing infrastructure, physical control, regulatory compliance, which is sort of related to the top there. Vendor lock-in's an interesting one, and then not sure. But it's all kind of, dare I say it, kind of computer says no-y stuff. Interestingly, though, I got in touch with a guy I know at Mimecast. He got some research for me. It's reckoned about 40% of UK businesses are using perimeter email security that is effectively cloud. So things like Forefront or Mimecast or Pastini, those kind of products. So that doesn't really tally, was maybe because people aren't thinking of that sort of service as being cloud. That's pretty much under the control of the IT department. People here use travel agencies within your businesses? A few nods of heads. We use Amex. Why isn't Amex just seen as a cloud service these days? As a travel service? Because I go in, I book it through a web browser, I do all the transactions, it gets approved, yada, yada, yada. The reason it doesn't get really seen as a cloud service is because other than a bit of single sign-on integration, IT weren't really that involved with the procurement or the payment of that system. It goes through different budget lines. There's a real risk that we see a proliferation of systems and services within organisations where outsourcing of business process as a service, as I heard it described a few weeks ago, but because IT isn't involved in any of the governance, the Amex system doesn't properly integrate with the expenses system, by way of example, because it's the procurement lines are a bit odd. And then at the other extreme, which is completely out of the control of anyone, is the stuff that Dave's been talking about, which is the consumerised services that people are using to do business. LinkedIn, over 100 million people using that now. I don't know if you saw The Apprentice last night. What happens when people don't use consumer cloud services to do business is they make a complete stuff up of it. By way of interesting things that are happening in this world, though, Wise Group, if you go onto the web, I'll put onto my website, onto the blog, I'll put a list of links and stuff. There's a BPOS cloud, using it for collaboration, yada, 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 case study written about Wise Group. Wise Group are a third sector organisation that help people into work. They've been quite adaptive over the years. They started as a company, I think, helping people get better at energy saving. The case study about how they use BPOS is really interesting, but the fascinating thing is that as a result of doing that, now they have set themselves up as a IT consultancy without any IT to help other companies in the third sector to be able to move to cloud computing. That, I think, is really, really profound, because that means that we've got people now in competition with traditional systems integrators who've got an advantage that they really understand the business part, and they don't need to understand the technology part because that's all commoditised out by the cloud providers. Porter's Five Forces helps to explain some of this, but I'll I'll do some stuff on the blog about that in more detail. What is it that IT people are seeing as the most important benefits? It's all the kind of margin stuff. It's IT efficiency, cost saving, ability to grow capacity on demand, hardware cost savings. It's not really about the innovation. And this breaks down as to where people are at. Software as a service is kind of being seen as stuff that you're using already or in the next few months and is taking a lead. So, the final part of this, what do you think is going to be the main impact? And again, it's very technology focused. Less time spent updating infrastructure. There is the better service to the business part, but it still drives down into the traditional IT things. This is the response from IT professionals around the place. And then where do they see their own knowledge on cloud at the moment? And this is the bit that I find terrifying. I'm just beginning to familiarise myself. What can we do to help? Well, just to come back to this, there's a whole load of services that my team are helping to provide to be able to educate people, but I think that the really key thing we need to drive out of that is that there's bits of this IT industry that are sleepwalking into extinction at the moment, and doing all we can to be able to help people just start to get their heads around what is a very complex and challenging area is, I think, the really big challenge for us in the IT industry now. Anyway, whistle-stop tour on the second part there. Thank you all for your attention, and thanks to Dave as well for a great view on the consumerisation side. Thank you all.